Welcome back. I want to play now more of what the Attorney General William Barr said this morning. Critics, and there are many of them, they're saying this sounds like a partisan, not the head of the Justice Department. You judge for yourself. Take a listen.
The Russian government sought to interfere in our election process. But thanks to the special counsel's thorough investigation, we now know that the Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign. As he said from the beginning, there was in fact no collusion. There is substantial evidence to show that the president was frustrated and angered by his sincere belief that the investigation was undermining his presidency, propelled by his political opponents, and fueled by illegal leaks. Nonetheless, the White House fully cooperated with the special counsel's investigation.
So Trump, an honest broker here who was the victim because his feelings were hurt. Okay, now we've been talking about this already this evening. Some of the most damning things in the Mueller report deal with obstruction of justice. My next guest says the report shows that the obstruction case is much worse than we knew about. Former federal prosecutor Roland Riopel, he joins us now. And Roland, I want to get into your takeaways from the report itself, but almost forgotten in all this is at 9:30 this morning, the performance that we saw from William Barr. In no particular order, he told us that he endorsed Trump's behavior, that Trump was the victim in the at least 10 different instances of obstruction potentially that were laid out by Mueller. He chalked it up to that he was frustrated, did Barr say about the president, that somehow excused it. And now we learned that, in fact, he did give a sneak peek of the document, albeit redacted supposedly, to the White House itself. It is shocking. I know that won't be the big takeaway today, but in context, that he was not an honest broker, and we expected much more when we heard the confirmation of him.
Yes, Richard, I have to say that to me is one of the two really big disappointments just in the parts of having read some parts of this report and having watched Attorney General Barr's behavior this morning. He has not acted in the best traditions of the Department of Justice, and I think he'll be judged pretty harshly by history as a result. And I think it's a very sad thing, frankly.
Yeah, he's not the president's personal attorney. He's the Attorney General, the top law enforcement officer in the world. You said there was two major disappointments you took away from the report. What was the second?
The fact that Mueller's investigation turned up so much detail on the attack on our electoral system by the Russians. Much of it disclosed, at least in part, in some of the indictments that Mr. Mueller returned, months ago, and Congress has done nothing about this, nothing, to make sure that our next election is more secure. That's a really disappointing and frankly somewhat frightening fact that Congress has done nothing to address making our elections more secure when Russia was so successful in attacking the last election. And a third thing I'll say is the fact that the Republican chair of the Senate committee in charge of investigating all this apparently leaked materials to the White House inappropriately. That's not a good thing either. What Senator Burr did. So those are three things that were really shocking to me.
How about the principal takeaways, though, from this? It almost painted a scene where it was such a Keystone Cops situation in the White House, Roland, that the only reason the president didn't commit obstruction was because people wouldn't follow his orders, but it was his intent to obstruct.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that part of the report, the obstruction summation, the little executive summary, anybody can read for themselves. And Mr. Mueller as much as says that, Mr. Trump attempted to obstruct justice in every way possible, every way he could think of. But he was, A, too dumb to get away with it, and B, everybody around him just paid no attention to him and refused to do what he wanted them to do, and that's ultimately what saved him. But he attempted in every way he could think of to obstruct the Mueller investigation. And you're right about the Keystone Cops aspect of this. This report paints a very damning picture of the White House, although it's one that's not unfamiliar to us from the investigative journalists who've published books on how dysfunctional this White House is.
Now, I want to give you credit, Roland. You've been saying from the beginning, as much as we focus on the report, focus on the Southern District, focus on the Eastern District, and man, were you proven to be right. We now learn from this report 14 probes have basically been outsourced by Mueller and team. Speak about the significance of that.
Yeah, what that tells us is it ain't over, right? Mr. Trump is caught, and those around him, I believe, are caught in a terrible quicksand pond of investigations. 14 other investigations, most of them blacked out entirely in the report, so nobody has any real idea what they might be. But it appears that there, are so many people around Mr. Trump and Mr. Trump himself being investigated from so many different angles that it's really going to be misery for years to come for everybody who's near Trump and for Trump himself, and who knows where it'll all end up. It's really shocking that there would be 14 investigations going on right now, most of which we don't even have any idea what they are.
And to me, as I've said, you've been saying for a long time, follow, as you say, where this goes next in terms of these district courts. Roland, we're going to have much more to talk about in the coming days, but I certainly appreciate on short notice you making time for us as always. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, happy to be with you, Richard. Very interesting day.
All right, coming up next, the Mueller probe may be done, but Congress still in the middle of several probes of the Trump administration. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, he'll join us next.